Welcome to Chat with Leaders. Our mission is to give resilient servant leaders a platform for sharing the inspiring things that they're doing to lead their teams, their customers, and themselves wisely. Today, I had the pleasure of being joined by Cliff Johnson, the Chief Commercial Officer over at Rented. Hey, Cliff.
Hey, Chris. Great to see you today.
So alignment in company vision is super important. And I know that you moved from Portland down here to Atlanta relatively recently in the last few years. Talk to me a little bit about that. Why did you make that move and why is that company vision so important?
Yeah, I mean, the move is 100% to come join rented.com here in Atlanta. I really loved Portland. I lived there for about a decade and joined the community very much. I mean, it's a community full of social entrepreneurs, which is something that speaks near and dear to my heart. But I've been very happy moving down here in Atlanta and being welcomed by a community of people that have a similar mindset. So I think I'm just struck by the similarities between the two cities in many ways. But my specific situation, I had founded a company in Portland called Vacasa, which is a vacation rental management company. I started with one other person and grew it very rapidly over a period of 8.5 years. And we had gone from being a bootstrapped, very kind of lean startup mentality to becoming a very well-funded company. And that changed the dynamic of the company quite a bit in the sense that what used to be more about building a business organically, and the way I like to build a business is really leading with providing a great experience for your team and then your customers. And with Vacasa, we had homeowners that owned vacation rental properties and guests who would stay at them. And when you take outside funding, you have another stakeholder in there. That's the investor. And so anytime the investor comes in, that can change the dynamics of the company. It doesn't always have to be for the worst, but for somebody like me who really thrives off of the purpose behind a business, that's what keeps me motivated and going. And so when I made the decision to leave Vacasa, it was really to come join rented.com, which was founded by the CEO, Andrew McConnell, who's become a close friend of mine over the years. And I knew that the two of us had a very similar vision when it came down to, how to run a business and who to reward for the success of that business. And so one of the key principles there was having every employee as a shareholder. And so that was one thing that really attracted me to Rented. The other was the vision of the company. And this is going to be a fairly broad vision, but the vision was to better utilize the world's assets. So the way Andrew described it was securitize the world's assets, which is very financial speak. But what that translates into is that if you have things such as vacant homes in the vacation rental industry that then become utilized, there's a real trickle-down effect, unlike the one that was claimed in the 80s. A real trickle-down effect that means that there will be more homes being utilized for a better purpose. So that could be, the nicer homes on the market might end up getting used as vacation rentals, but that will open up more long-term rentals at more affordable prices for people who need it.
I did some research.
So that's kind of the big vision.
Yeah, no, I did some research between the last time we talked, and I found that there like 17 million houses are vacant as of I think it was 2018 or something like that. What can be done with all those? And I know that we're talking about social entrepreneurship as well. How do those two kind of connect together in your industry?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, and it's a statistic that I try to hammer home throughout our industry all the time. Of those 17, 18 million vacant homes in the U.S., about 3 to 4 million would make great vacation rentals. There are others that are maybe sitting in Toledo or Detroit that are abandoned. So that's another category of properties where revitalization is really the answer there. And Gary, Indiana actually had a very interesting program there where they would give people properties if they would commit to living in them for a certain time period and reinvesting in them so that
Interesting.
they could improve the neighborhoods. But on the vacation rental side, the answer really is getting the people that own those assets to understand that they're more valuable getting them into the market than they are sitting vacant. And that seems like, well, of course, why wouldn't it be? But for a long time, homeowners that have these second homes and these other assets would feel like they wouldn't make enough money for it to be worth the trouble of putting it into a rental pool, especially in the vacation rental side. So while I always hope that people think of it through an altruistic side, usually it's the economic motivator that gets things moving in the right direction. And then that creates the opportunity for executing on the altruistic side.
Yeah. Now let's go back to the social entrepreneurship piece. Just to make sure, can you explain really what at its core social entrepreneurship is for people who might be a little unfamiliar with it?
Yeah, really, at the simplest level, it's just including something beyond profit as a primary goal for the business that you're starting. And with that something being some societal benefit. So this is the modern concept of this is really, in a B Corp. So people that designate their company as a B Corp are committing to having some social purpose to that business beyond just financial returns to their investors or shareholders, whoever they might be. There are societies. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I actually just met somebody whose company was a B Corp, and that actually threw me for a loop because I did not know what that was until really the last couple of weeks. It's a really interesting model. Can you explain a little bit about what B Corps are?
Yeah, it really is. There's some loose requirements on what you need to be in order to be a B Corp, but it's very open-ended in terms of designating that you're going to have some part of your company dedicated towards a social benefit, and that's where the B comes from, the benefit corporation. There's not a lot of enforcement on it, so I would say right now it's in a very nascent stage where it's basically you say we're a B Corp. We're doing good things. There's not a lot of people checking in on you to make sure that you are doing good things. So the regulatory environment is pretty loose. There's some loose requirements that you have to be in business with revenue for, I believe it's about a year before you can be designated as B Corp. One of the more famous ones is Kickstarter, which has a pretty interesting story without being a B Corp, but is probably one of the more prominent B Corps out there.
Interesting. I didn't realize that Kickstarter was one. I'm gonna have to look into that a little bit. For somebody who's looking at, potential employment opportunities and trying to finding a company that kind of falls in line with their vision, what are some good indicators that you've seen of companies actually being good social entrepreneurs in various different industries?
Yeah, I think one of the clearest examples of this is Patagonia. And it's one that I speak to quite a bit in the sense that they've been around, 40, almost 50 years now. Actually, I think it is 50 years. And they started out really just with a passion for mountain climbing, rock climbing, being in the outdoors. And the founders realized that their activities were harming the environment in the way they were doing it, and that their equipment they were selling was part of the problem. So they made a choice to make a hard pivot to stop creating equipment that way and adapt it to fit something where they could still do what they love, but in a way that didn't harm the environment. And that became such a core piece of what their identity was, that then they went on to do more things for societal benefit, for social good as part of their mission, including preserving property, all over the world, and then setting up in-office daycare at their headquarters. So they really took it to other areas of the business to become part of who they are, and to make sure they're kind of doing the right thing at each stage. And you could, it's a large company, like many large companies, not everything they do is going to be the right thing according to all people. How much they charge for a sweatshirt, for example, might not be the right thing for all people, but at the end of the day, it's a good example of how they've allowed their values to lead the business. And so really that's what a lot of social entrepreneurship is allowing your values to lead the business as opposed to what's the most financially lucrative thing that your business can do.
And one of those things about kind of putting values above profits is the whole employee owned business, which I think what you said was rented.com is employee owned. What, this will be edited out. I totally just lost my train of thought.
No, that's okay.
um, for some companies who are considering going that employee owned route, talk to me a little bit about, why somebody would want to do that. It seems like a good idea to me on the outset.
Yeah, the number one is just getting alignment towards your overall mission as a company and towards improving your bottom line from a financial perspective, which sounds like a really boring way to put it. But at the end of the day, it's if you don't like the altruistic side of it, it's just good for your business. Having people that are engaged and care about your bottom line and care about the value of your business, working for it, make sure that everybody's aligned towards the same goals. And Chris, you and I talked a little bit about all the jobs I've had over my years. I worked at Olive Garden, Outback, some Filene's, which is a big department store. I worked at TGI Fridays. But I'm going with all this, I worked at a lot of large companies where the employees did not care at all about the business. They were just there to get a paycheck and move on.
Oh, yeah.
And then the behavior that spurs is not something you'd ever want to pay somebody to do. So you end up with these situations where if you view your employees as a means to an end instead of like part of the solution, they're going to treat it that way as well. And so I've honestly never seen it be a bad thing that employees are owners. I'm trying to think through all the examples I have here. I've definitely seen it not be as good of a thing as it could be, because if you don't educate the employees on the value of what you're giving them, they're not just going to intrinsically understand that. You have to include them in the why. Why are they shareholders? Why does it matter? Why does their job and how does their job connect to the overall value of the business and the mission of the business? And I think if you do that part right as well, then you get the true benefit of it.
And you can't just throw culture into the mix. You just can't hire this culture person that's going to run the whole culture element of that entire business. You have to understand how people's personalities work well within the culture that you're trying to implement. And I was listening to an episode of Donald Miller's Story Brand podcast, and the guest was talking about how he requires each of his employees to take the Enneagram test, which I still need to do because I'm genuinely curious now. And they make those results public for all the other employees of the company, which I found really interesting because there's nuance in each of those numbers that Enneagram puts out there. And so if you're already going into a meeting with somebody that you don't know, but you at least have a general idea of their personality type and what triggers them and what doesn't, I feel like that's going to breed a lot of more empathy within the whole culture of what you're trying to do. So although that was really interesting, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely feel like there can be a lot of value in at least understanding your fellow employees better, right? I think it's really hard to teach empathy. And so sometimes I see these programs and, it's what do people do with the information that you give them? So if you do the personality tests and then people get it and they say, but they haven't bought into it. And they say, well, that's great that this person, is more emotional thinker than a data-based thinker. If they don't adapt their style to that person, it's not going to matter anyway, So in fact, like it could also be used in the wrong way if like vulnerabilities are revealed about your employees and you have other employees that are willing to take advantage of that. So I think anytime you're dealing with, creating an environment where you're putting people's vulnerabilities out there, you also have to equalize that with having a supportive environment where those that take advantage of that or that don't really fit within that, are not able to be rewarded on it. And I think that the clearest area that you see this is where you have cultures of nepotism. This happens quite a bit where, people play the political game well and they praise the right people at the right time and they get promotions that are not based on the quality of their work as opposed to, what their relationships are. And I think, you hear this all the time, and when people are getting hired in new jobs, it's not what you know, it's who you know, is the old saying, right?
Yeah.
But I think moving towards a world where it's more about what you know and how you treat people would be a positive step in the right direction. So anyway, that's a very long answer to what you said. But I guess what I was getting at is that it's similar to giving employees ownership, like knowing what their preferences for communication and personality types are is just part of the equation. If you don't educate people on how to use that and why to care about it, then it could actually have a detrimental effect.
So kind of in wrapping up here, if there was one thing that you wanted to kind of leave all the people that are listening to this with, what would that one thing be for you?
It would be really be transparent with your team about what your company's purpose is. Let them be part of the decisions whenever possible on the future of the company and the direction of the company. One of the things that I'm pretty, I would say, out there on is like transparency around financials. I mean, if you're a publicly traded company, your financials are fairly transparent anyway because they have to be for SEC reporting. Yeah. But a lot of private companies are really guarded with their team about what's going on in the company. And I think that people will fill in the blanks on their own, and that's generally worse than just being transparent with them. So I would say start with a place of transparency, and then you'll get to the real issues pretty quickly. And if you address them head on, as opposed to letting them fester and filter throughout the team, you're going to get to a better answer faster. So yeah, I would say just be honest with your team and be transparent and try to include them in as much as possible.
Being honest and open, it's typically a good way to go and go about doing business and life in general. So
that's true.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Cliff. Thank you for joining me today on Chat with Leaders. Cliff is the Chief Commercial Officer over at Rented. And Cliff, is there any, if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, what would the best way to do that be?
Yeah, my email is super easy, cliff@rented.com, or if you just go to rented.com, you can find us there as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the time today, and we will talk to y'all a little bit later next week.